Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone is fighting a battle inside their own mind because of you? Not because you've done anything dramatic, not because you've chased them, not because you've tried to convince them to stay, but because your presence alone has become difficult for them to ignore. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever sensed that someone's attention keeps finding its way back to you, no matter how much distance exists between you, then stay with me for a few minutes. And if these conversations help you see yourself more clearly, subscribe. Not because I need another subscriber, but because sometimes the things we refuse to look at today become the exact things we wish someone had explained sooner. Now let me tell you something most men misunderstand. When people hear the word obsessed, they imagine constant messages, endless attention, dramatic confessions. But real obsession often looks nothing like that. In fact, the people who think about you the most are sometimes the ones saying the least. That is where men get confused. Because you assume that if someone wants you, they will show it. If someone misses you, they will call. If someone cares, they will make it obvious. But human beings are rarely that simple, especially when emotions become intense, especially when attraction starts colliding with fear. I've spent years listening to people describe relationships they couldn't understand, and one pattern appears again and again. The person who feels the strongest emotions is often the person trying hardest to hide them. Not because they don't care, because they care too much. Think about that for a moment. When something becomes emotionally important, people become cautious. They analyze every interaction. They replay conversations. They wonder whether they said the wrong thing, whether they revealed too much, whether they are becoming too invested. And that's when something interesting starts happening. You become a recurring character in their private thoughts. Not because they planned it, not because they chose it, but because their mind keeps returning to unfinished emotional questions. What does he think about me? Why did that conversation stay with me? Why am I checking his profile again? Why am I comparing other people to him? The mind hates uncertainty, and when someone creates emotional uncertainty mixed with attraction, the brain keeps reopening the file, again and again and again. Now, before your imagination runs wild, let me ground this in reality. This doesn't mean every person who looks at you twice is secretly in love. It doesn't mean every delayed text message contains hidden passion. That's fantasy. I'm talking about something much more human, much more believable. I'm talking about the quiet psychological struggle that happens when someone wants to stop thinking about you and realizes they can't do it as easily as they expected. Because there is something about you that keeps slipping back into their mind. Maybe it's the way you listened when nobody else did. Maybe it's the way you remained calm when everyone else was performing. Maybe it's the fact that you walked away when most people would have chased. Whatever the reason, you became emotionally memorable. And trust me, being memorable is far more powerful than being impressive. Most people are impressive for 5 minutes. Very few people stay in someone's thoughts at midnight. That's a completely different thing. And if someone is currently experiencing that struggle because of you, the signs are often much quieter than you think. One of the biggest mistakes men make is assuming that attraction grows through constant contact. But sometimes attraction grows in absence. Sometimes the moment a person realizes what you mean to them is the moment they no longer have immediate access to you. And that realization can be surprisingly uncomfortable. Because when someone is always available, the mind relaxes. There's no mystery, no emotional tension, no unanswered questions. But when someone leaves an emotional impression and then becomes less present, something changes. Suddenly, the brain starts filling in the silence. I remember a woman once describing a man she couldn't stop thinking about. What was interesting wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. She never described him as the most handsome man she'd ever met. She never called him perfect. She never said he swept her off her feet. Instead, she kept repeating one sentence. I don't know why he stays in my head. That sentence tells you everything. Because attraction isn't always logical. Sometimes a person becomes important before we consciously decide they matter. And that creates internal conflict. Part of us wants to move on. Another part keeps looking back. It's like trying to close a book while still wondering how the story ends. You tell yourself you're finished, but your hand keeps reaching for the next page. And that's exactly what happens when someone becomes emotionally attached to the idea of you. Notice I said the idea of you, because this is where things become psychologically fascinating. Nobody falls for reality immediately. At first, people fall for their experience of reality, the way they felt around you, the version of themselves that appeared when you were nearby, the emotions they associate with your presence. That's why someone can spend an entire day functioning normally and then suddenly remember a small moment involving you, a conversation, a smile, a joke, a look, something insignificant on the surface, yet somehow it carries emotional weight. And once that memory returns, it rarely arrives alone. It brings questions, wondering, imagining, comparing. The mind starts connecting dots that may not even exist, not because the person is irrational, because human beings naturally search for meaning, especially in relationships, especially when emotions remain unresolved. And here's a truth many men never hear. The more someone tries to force themselves not to think about a person, the more noticeable that person becomes. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as ironic mental processing. Try not to think about something, and suddenly you're thinking about it constantly. The same thing happens emotionally. Someone tells themselves, "I'm over him." Then something reminds them of you, and now they're thinking about you again. Not because they wanted to, because the mind doesn't respond well to emotional commands. Feelings don't disappear just because someone decides they should. That's not how people work. That's not how attachment works. Which is why some people find themselves trapped in an invisible tug of war. One side says, "Move forward." The other side whispers, "But what if? What if he felt the same? What if I misunderstood? What if I walked away too soon? What if there's something here I haven't fully understood?" Those questions can linger for weeks, sometimes months. And the fascinating part? The person experiencing them often looks completely normal from the outside. They're going to work, talking to friends, living their life. Meanwhile, there's a quiet emotional conversation happening beneath the surface, a conversation nobody else can hear, a conversation where your name keeps appearing, not every hour, not every minute, but often enough that it becomes impossible to ignore. And eventually, that inner conflict starts showing itself in subtle ways, not through dramatic declarations, not through movie-style moments, but through behaviors most men overlook completely. This is usually the point where people expect me to start listing obvious signs. They text you first. They look at your stories. They ask about you. And yes, sometimes those things happen. But what I've learned after years of listening to people talk about their relationships is that the strongest emotions often reveal themselves in much stranger ways. For example, have you ever noticed how some people seem unable to fully disappear? They leave, then somehow they reappear. Not dramatically, not directly, just enough to remind you they still exist. Maybe they react to something weeks later. Maybe they suddenly become active after a long silence. Maybe they find a reason to reconnect that feels almost accidental. On the surface, it seems insignificant. But psychologically, it's often the result of something deeper. Because when someone has genuinely moved on emotionally, they usually stop looking for emotional openings. Their attention shifts elsewhere. Their energy follows a different path. But when part of them remains emotionally attached, they keep circling the unanswered question. Not necessarily because they want a relationship, not necessarily because they're planning a future. Sometimes they simply haven't found peace with what they feel. And that creates a very specific kind of behavior. They stay curious. Curiosity is one of the most overlooked signs of emotional investment. Think about it. We don't stay curious about people who mean nothing to us. We become curious about people who affect us, people who challenge our assumptions, people who create emotional movement inside us. And when someone can't fully understand why you affected them, curiosity becomes difficult to let go of. Suddenly they wonder what you're doing, how you're feeling, whether you're happy, whether you've changed, whether you're thinking about them too. Now here's where things become uncomfortable. Because the truth is, many people aren't obsessed with another person. They're obsessed with how that person made them feel. That's a very important distinction. The human mind doesn't always chase people. Sometimes it chases emotional experiences. The feeling of being understood, the feeling of being seen, the feeling of excitement, the feeling of possibility. And if you gave someone an emotional experience they rarely find elsewhere, you become connected to something much larger than attraction. You become connected to meaning, and meaning is hard to replace. I once spoke with a woman who ended a connection she believed was the right decision. Months later, she still thought about him, not because she wanted to restart the relationship, not because she couldn't meet someone else, but because she couldn't recreate what she felt when she was around him. That haunted her more than his absence. Read that again in your mind. Sometimes people don't miss the person, they miss the emotional reality they experienced with that person. And when they can't find it elsewhere, their thoughts keep returning, trying to understand, trying to compare, trying to solve something that isn't really a puzzle. Meanwhile, the man at the center of all this often has no idea. He's living his life, assuming nothing special happened, assuming he was forgettable, assuming everyone moved on, not realizing that somewhere, someone is still replaying conversations he barely remembers, still wondering about moments he considered ordinary, still carrying emotions that never found a proper ending. Because what feels ordinary to one person can become unforgettable to another. And that is where emotional attachment becomes truly complicated. Not when someone openly admits what they feel, but when they spend months trying to convince themselves they don't. And the longer that struggle continues, the harder it becomes to ignore what their heart keeps trying to tell them. There is something else nobody talks about enough. Sometimes the person thinking about you isn't struggling because of what happened between you. They're struggling because of what never happened. And believe it or not, that can be even more powerful. Human beings are surprisingly good at recovering from certainty. A clear ending hurts, a rejection hurts, a breakup hurts. But eventually the mind begins to process it. It has something concrete to work with, something real, something finished. What the mind struggles with most is ambiguity. The relationships that almost happened, the conversations that ended too soon, the feelings that were never fully expressed, the opportunities that quietly slipped away. Those experiences have a strange way of lingering because there is no conclusion, no final chapter, no emotional full stop. Only questions. And questions can live in someone's mind for a very long time. Maybe that's why certain people never completely disappear from our thoughts. Not because they were perfect, not because they were destined, but because our story with them feels unfinished. And unfinished stories create emotional tension. Imagine watching a movie that suddenly cuts to black 20 minutes before the ending. You would think about it. You would wonder what happened. You would create possible endings in your mind. Relationships work the same way. The brain naturally seeks closure. When closure doesn't arrive, imagination often takes over. That's why someone can be lying in bed at night, completely exhausted, and suddenly find themselves thinking about you. Not because they're trying to, because the mind returns to unresolved emotional experiences when everything else becomes quiet. During the day, people stay busy. Work distracts them. Friends distract them. Responsibilities distract them. But late at night, that's when honesty becomes harder to avoid. That's when people stop performing for the world. And that's often when the thoughts they've been pushing away start returning. I wish more men understood this. Because many of you assume that if someone isn't actively pursuing you, they aren't thinking about you. Those are not the same thing. People can think about someone intensely and still remain silent. Fear does that. Pride does that. Uncertainty does that. Life circumstances do that. Human emotions are rarely as straightforward as movies make them seem. I've seen people spend months convincing themselves they were over someone, then hear a song, see a photograph, visit a familiar place, and suddenly everything they thought they buried rises back to the surface. Not because they were pretending, because emotions often move in circles rather than straight lines. Some feelings leave quietly. Others return when you least expect them. And when someone has formed a deep emotional association with you, you become connected to parts of their life they don't consciously realize. Certain songs remind them of you. Certain conversations remind them of you. Certain emotions remind them of you. You become woven into their internal landscape. Not constantly, not obsessively in the dramatic sense, but deeply enough that your absence never feels entirely complete. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more meaningful a connection felt, the harder it becomes to replace. Not because nobody else is attractive, not because nobody else is interesting, but because human beings don't simply replace emotional experiences like changing clothes. Every connection leaves a different imprint. Every person touches a different part of us. And when someone touched a part of them that few others ever reached, their mind has a habit of returning there, again and again, quietly asking a question they may never say out loud. What if I lost something important? Now I want to tell you something that might surprise you. The people who create the deepest emotional impact are rarely the people trying hardest to be unforgettable. In fact, it's often the opposite. The men who spend all their energy trying to impress everyone usually leave only temporary impressions. But the man who is comfortable being himself, the man who doesn't desperately need approval, the man who listens more than he performs, that man has a strange effect on people. Because authenticity creates something attention cannot: trust. And trust is emotionally powerful. Think about the people you've never completely forgotten. It probably wasn't because they were perfect. It probably wasn't because they said all the right things. More likely, it was because they felt real. There was something genuine about them, something unfiltered, something difficult to find. And when people encounter that, they remember it. Especially in a world where so many interactions feel transactional, where everyone seems to be selling an image, playing a role, trying to appear more impressive than they really are. A genuinely grounded person stands out, not loudly, quietly, and quiet things often leave the deepest marks. I once asked someone why she couldn't stop thinking about a particular man. Her answer stayed with me. She said, "Because I felt more like myself when I was around him." That sentence contains more truth than most dating advice ever will. People are drawn toward experiences that help them reconnect with themselves, not just toward beauty, not just toward status, not just toward excitement, toward emotional freedom. The freedom to stop pretending, the freedom to stop performing, the freedom to simply exist. And when someone associates that feeling with you, you become difficult to forget. Not because you're flawless, because you're meaningful. There is a difference, a huge difference. Many men spend years trying to become more attractive. Very few focus on becoming emotionally memorable. Yet emotional memory is often what remains long after physical attraction fades. Because attraction catches attention, meaning holds attention. And when someone is wrestling with strong feelings about you, that's usually what they're wrestling with: meaning. What did you mean to them? Why did the connection affect them so deeply? Why do they still compare new experiences to old moments involving you? Why does your memory keep showing up when they least expect it? These questions don't appear because someone is weak. They appear because emotional experiences shape us. Every important connection changes something, sometimes only a little, sometimes more than we realize. And here's where many men underestimate themselves. You may think your kindness was ordinary, your attention was ordinary, your presence was ordinary. But emotional impact is determined by the person receiving it, not the person giving it. What felt small to you may have arrived at exactly the right moment in someone else's life. Maybe they were lonely. Maybe they felt unseen. Maybe they were carrying burdens nobody knew about. And then they met someone who made them feel understood, even briefly. Those moments matter, more than most people realize, which is why months later, or even years later, someone can still find themselves thinking about you and wondering why they haven't completely let go. Not because they're trapped, not because they're obsessed in some dramatic movie scene, but because part of their heart still recognizes the significance of what they felt. And significance is one of the hardest things in life to replace. So let me leave you with one final thought tonight, the thought that the man watching this may need to hear more than anything else. What if the reason you struggle to believe someone could be thinking about you is because you've spent so much of your life underestimating your own impact? I see this all the time. A man remembers every mistake he made, every opportunity he missed, every relationship that didn't work, every moment he wishes he could take back. And slowly, without realizing it, he begins creating a story about himself. A story that says, "I'm forgettable. I'm replaceable. I'm not the person people stay attached to." It's a painful story. And the worst part is that many men never question it. They simply accept it as truth. But the reality is often very different, because while you're focusing on your flaws, other people are remembering entirely different things. They're remembering how safe they felt talking to you, how calm they felt around you, how you made them laugh during a difficult time, how you listened when nobody else seemed interested, how you treated them with respect when they expected indifference. Human beings are strange that way. We judge ourselves by our insecurities. Others remember us through their experiences, and those two versions rarely match. That's why someone can genuinely miss you while you're convinced you've already been forgotten. Someone can still feel connected to you while you're questioning whether you ever mattered. Someone can replay memories involving you while you're assuming those moments meant nothing. Life is full of these invisible realities, stories happening inside people that we never get to see, private emotions, private reflections, private struggles. And sometimes, yes, you are the center of those reflections far more often than you realize. Not because you're magical, not because you're destined to be with every person who thinks about you, and certainly not because every feeling leads to a relationship. Life is more complicated than that. People carry emotions for many reasons. Some act on them, some don't. Some eventually reconnect, some move forward. That's simply part of being human. But what matters tonight is understanding something deeper. You do not need to chase validation to be valuable. You do not need constant attention to be significant. You do not need everyone to choose you in order to matter. Sometimes the strongest evidence of your impact is invisible. It's the conversation happening in someone's mind when nobody else is around, the memory that unexpectedly returns, the smile they can't explain, the question they still haven't answered, the feeling they thought would fade but somehow didn't. And if someone is currently experiencing that because of you, you may never fully know. Most emotional battles happen behind closed doors. Most hearts reveal far less than they actually feel. But that doesn't make those feelings less real. So tonight, instead of wondering who is thinking about you, ask yourself something more important. Have you been giving yourself credit for the impact you leave on other people? Because the truth is, the most memorable men are rarely the ones demanding attention. They're the ones who quietly change how someone feels about themselves. And once that happens, once a person associates you with comfort, growth, understanding, peace, excitement, or hope, a part of you tends to stay with them, long after the conversation ends, long after the distance appears, long after both lives continue moving forward. And sometimes, that quiet presence becomes impossible for them to completely forget. If you've ever underestimated your value, remember this. You may be far more unforgettable than you've allowed yourself to believe.